Black Dahlia. Episode 8. The Avenger, Communications. By the time of the coroner's inquest, viable leads were already beginning to dry up. Detectives Harry Hansen and Finis Brown continued to sift through an ever-growing number of confessing Sams. And were sending investigators back to the Limert Park neighborhood, going door to door, searching for new suspects and leads from residents. Investigators focused on asking these two questions. 1. Do you know anyone in the neighborhood who is mentally unbalanced? 2. Do you know of any medical students? Maybe they should have added a third question as to whether any doctors lived in the area or simply looked across the street to the Dr. Walter Bailey residence, but investigators must have known a well-known doctor had ties to the area. Perhaps investigators already cleared him. We will look into him in another episode. Aggie Underwood worked her own theory that the Black Dahlia murder was tied in with a series of unsolved murders. On January 23, 1947, Aggie wrote,
Werewolves leave trail of women murders in L.A. In the gory album of unsolved murders, kidnappings, and crimes against women in general, Los Angeles police may have to insert a new page. The mystery of the sadistic slaying of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. So far, all clues have failed. This latest murder mystery, which has provoked the greatest mobilization of crime detection experts in the city's history, is the latest in a long series. The finding of her dismembered body was preceded by other gruesome discoveries of women victims slain for lust, for revenge, for reasons unknown.
Pictured along with Elizabeth Short are Ora Murray, Georgette Bauerdorf, and Gertrude Landon. Some researchers still believe that Beth's murder is tied into a series of unsolved murders, while others discredit this theory. In the interest of completion, we will look into the werewolf slayings in a later episode. But for now, Jimmy Richardson had a lead calling. While readers were perusing Aggie's article, Richardson answered a phone call that could have brought him closer to the killer than any other lead before or since. Richardson related the account of the call.
The story dwindled to a few paragraphs and was about to fade out altogether, and one day I answered the phone and heard the voice I'll never forget.
Is this the city editor?
Yes.
What is your name, please?
Richardson.
Well, Mr. Richardson, I must congratulate you on what the Examiner has done in the Black Dahlia case.
Thank you.
You seem to have run out of material.
That's right. A soft laugh sounded in the earpiece.
Maybe I can be of some assistance.
There was something in the way he said it that sent a shiver up my spine. We need it.
I'll tell you what to do. I'll send you some of the things she had with her when she, shall we say, disappeared.
It was difficult for me to control my voice. I began scribbling on a sheet of paper the words "trace this call." What kind of things? I asked as I tossed the paper to my assistant on the desk. I could see him read and start jiggling the receiver arm on his phone to get the attention of the switchboard girl.
Oh, say her address book, and her birth certificate, and a few other things she had in her handbag.
When will I get them? I asked, and could hear my assistant telling May Northern, the switchboard girl, to trace my call.
Oh, within the next day or so. See how far you can get with them. And now I must say goodbye. You may be trying to trace this call.
Wait a minute. I said, but I heard a click, and the phone was dead.
Jimmy Richardson would make his own profile of the Black Dahlia killer, postulating that the killer thought he could outwit and outthink the world, and that he would be one against the world. The perpetrator of the perfect crime. While Richardson waited impatiently for the promised package, the police had their own important break. Robert Hyman found a pair of high-heeled shoes and a handbag behind his cafe at 1136 South Crenshaw. Thinking this suspicious, he went inside to call the police. In the meantime, trash collectors cleaned out the trash can, disposing of the garbage and the shoes and handbag along with it. Police swarmed over the city dump in a frantic search for the possible clues. After recovering the handbag and one shoe, police brought in Red Manley to see if he could identify the items as belonging to Beth. The items suspected as being Beth's were placed with a number of other handbags and high-heeled shoes. Red recognized the shoe from the double-heel caps that Beth had put on at a San Diego shoe repair shop she asked him to take her to during one of their dates. He confirmed the handbag was Beth's due to the still lingering scent of her distinctive perfume. On January 25, postal inspectors intercepted the package Jimmy Richardson had been promised. At 6:30 p.m., reporters, police officers, and even a fingerprint expert, Sergeant Wheeler, gathered at the Metropolitan Downtown Post Office to open the package. The following items were removed from the package: Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, her Social Security card, a claim check dated January 9 for 2 suitcases and a hatbox that had been retrieved from the Greyhound bus station, a telegram relating to the trunk that had been retrieved from the Railway Express, business cards, photos of Beth with servicemen, a brown leather address book with several pages missing, and over 75 names and phone numbers written inside. 1937 was embossed in gold lettering on the cover, along with the name Mark Hansen, a figure we will be looking at closely in an upcoming episode. The contents had been soaked in gasoline in an attempt to destroy fingerprints. However, at least one smudged print was removed. Captain Donahoe commented,
"This is the big push. Our men are fanning out now to bring in the killer. We will bring in all sorts of people for questioning and eliminate them so long as they can eliminate themselves."
Monday, January 27, 1947, the Examiner received a second mailing, a postcard that had been mailed on January 26 from downtown Los Angeles.
Here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January 29, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police, Black Dahlia Avenger.
Police commented that the writing had been made with a new ballpoint pen. Note: today we would think nothing of a note written with a ballpoint pen. But ballpoint pens were a recent invention that had been military issued during the war. After the war, ballpoint pens that were available for public purchase cost $12.50. Checking the difference in value between 1947 and 2021 on usinflationcalculator.com, a ballpoint pen costing $12.50 in 1947 dollars would be the equivalent of $153.34 in today's dollars. Average people did not own ballpoint pens in 1947. Captain Donahoe believed the postcard to be legitimate and said,
"The fact that the postcard was printed rather than lettered with words cut from newspapers also supports the theory that the killer intends to turn himself into the police, and no longer needs to take pains to conceal his identity."
Donahoe also believed the signature, Black Dahlia Avenger, meant that the killer
murdered Elizabeth Short for some avenged wrong, either real or imagined.
Donahoe communicated to the killer in a public message,
"If you want to surrender as indicated by the postcard now in our hands, I will meet you at any public location at any time or at the Homicide Detail Office in the City Hall. Communicate immediately by telephoning Michigan 5211, extension 2521, or by mail."
Later on the 27th, another letter was received by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. This typed message was believed to have been sent by a woman due to lipstick smudges on the paper. Although Captain Donahoe did not release the details of the letter, he did state,
"It described an incident that might relate to the Elizabeth Short slaying. Detectives will also investigate a location described in the letter and check out other details before its contents are made public."
There was an odd, handwritten note on the envelope saying,
"Sorry, Greenwich Village, not Cotton Club."
On January 29, 1947, 2 more notes were received, both made from newspaper clippings. The first read,
"Dahlia's killer, cracking, wants terms."
The second read.
To Los Angeles Herald Express. I will give up in Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me.
LAPD crime lab analysts determined that the envelopes and paper were sent by the same suspect who sent the parcel that contained Beth's identification, and the Mark Hansen address book also sent this note. The Herald Express night edition showed a photo of this letter on the front page. The article was titled, "Dahlia Killer Notes Work of Same Man, Tests Show." Crime lab technicians also retrieved several dark hairs stuck in the Scotch tape used to affix the words onto the paper. The hairs were determined not to be those of Elizabeth Short, but could be used in comparison with the hair of future suspects. LAPD released the following statement.
We are dealing with a homicidal maniac who craves attention for his crime, and may come forward in a bold and spectacular manner for his curtain call after he has wrung out the last drop of drama from his deed.
Note, from the wording of this statement, it sounds most likely that it was written by Dr. Driver. Later that day, federal inspectors at the Terminal Annex Post Office in downtown Los Angeles discovered another note, described as a semi-literate death threat scribbled on glossy paper, torn from a note tablet. The contents of the message read,
A certain girl is going to get same as ES got if she squeals on us. We're going to Mexico City, catch us if you can. 2Ks.
On the back of the envelope was written,
E Short got it. Carol Marshall is next.
Note, this message was not printed in the newspapers. Carol Marshall was arrested in Barstow, California, along with companion Charles Edward Wells Jr., a veteran reported to be suffering from shell shock, after trying to sell a car in a suspicious manner, and after she was overheard saying that she knew who killed Beth Short, but she was afraid to tell. Jimmy Richardson consulted document expert, Clark Sellers, who at the time was considered a leading forensic handwriting expert. He testified for the prosecution at the Lindbergh baby kidnapping trial, helping convict Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Sellers examined the handwritten postcards and determined,
It was evident the writer took great pains to disguise his or her personality by printing instead of writing the message and by endeavoring to appear illiterate. But the style and formation of the printed letters betrayed the writer as an educated person.
The Examiner article stated that
microscopic tests had been taken by Sellers. These tests showed several important discoveries of the nature of which is being withheld.
Another expert, Henry Silver, analyzed the original parcel note as well as some other postcards mailed to the papers. Silver concluded,
The sender is an egomaniac and possibly a musician. The fluctuating baseline of the writing reveals the writer to be affected by extreme fluctuations of mood, dropping to melancholy. The writer suffers from mental conflict growing out of resentment or hatred due to frustration of sex urge. Because the last letters of many words are larger, it reveals extreme frankness. The writer is telling the truth. Furthermore, he can't keep his secret, and feeds his ego by telling. There is a fine sense of rhythm present, showing the penman to be either a musician or possibly a dancer. He is calculating and methodical.
The Black Dahlia Avenger never turned himself in on January 29 as promised. But on January 30, Captain Donahoe received a new pasted letter note. It read,
Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified.
The first.
Go slow, man, killer says. Black Dahlia case.
The second.
I have decided not to surrender. Too much fun fooling police. Black Dahlia Avenger.
The third.
Here is a photo of the werewolf killers. I saw him kill her. A friend.
The fourth.
The person sending these other notes ought to be arrested for forgery. B. D. A.
The fifth.
If he confesses, you won't need me. B. D. A.
The sixth.
Ask newsman at 5 plus Hill for clue. Why not let that nut go? I spoke to said man. B. D. A.
The third of the 6 January 31st messages showed an obscured photograph of a man's face. The face turned out to be that of 17-year-old Armand Robles. This and future Robles messages show the dubious nature of most of these messages. Herald Express reporters were already on top of the dubious messages. Along with an unobscured photo, they printed this.
A poison pen is using a picture of this young person in the Dahlia case letters. If this person will call the Evening Herald and Express office, a line may be obtained on the poison pen author of letters which send police on wild goose chases.
The next day, Florence Robles notified the Herald Express office, stating that her 17-year-old son, Armand Robles, was the individual pictured. Armand Robles told reporters that 3 weeks earlier, he had been assaulted on the 4300 block of Eagle Street on around January 10. Robles stated that he was knocked down by a man who then took his wallet. The photos printed in the newspaper had been taken about 3 months earlier at a shooting gallery on Main Street in downtown Los Angeles. The photos had been in his wallet. Robles described the assailant as well-dressed, tall, and driving a newer model car. The mailings to the Herald Express continued. The next pasted note simply said,
Yes or no.
On Saturday, February 1, 1947, another pasted note with another photo of Robles arrived. It said,
That young. I'll do him like I did the Black Dahlia. Black Dahlia Avenger.
This message also contained an arrow pointing to Robles's picture and the word "next" written above it. Police investigators and reporters of the time seemed to be divided as to the authenticity of the Avenger communications. The Robles messages only added more doubt. The first message included with the parcel containing Beth's personal effects must have been sent by the killer, and is possibly the only authentic communication. The previously mentioned profile by handwriting expert Clark Sellers thought the later Avenger notes were deliberately done to disguise the sender's personality. The later Robles poison pen letters are discredited by most modern researchers. Only the first communication, which also contained the parcel of Beth's belongings, was sent by the killer, an accomplice, or someone associated with the killer. Modern researcher Steve Hodel believes the notes were all made by the same person, his father George Hodel. And had handwriting analysis done that he thinks confirms his father wrote the handwritten notes. We'll look into Hodel's claims about his father in a future episode. Many of the later communications, especially the Robles communications, look like the same publicity seeking many confessing Sams were looking for. Such as notes referred to in the Herald Express article accusing the sender of sending police on wild goose chases. Whoever sent the written notes, killer or fraudster, must have had enough disposable income to spend on expensive ballpoint pens, or at least had access to ballpoint pens due to work or connection with someone who had one. Or perhaps the sender might have stolen one during their time in the service or from another source. Speaking about service and confessing Sams, we are about to come to the most famous of the confessing Sams, Corporal Joseph Dumais, who was at the time considered the most viable suspect since Red Manley. But before we focus on him, let's check on the state of the investigation. By the time the Avenger letters stopped and police were being sent on more and more wild goose chases, Captain Donahoe, using the press more and more to ask the public for clues and help with an ever-expanding body of possibilities and speculation, made this statement.
It appears impossible the short girl was murdered in the city. We are forced to this conclusion by the failure of anyone to report a possible place where she was killed within the city limits. If she was slain in a house or a room or motel in the city, it seems impossible that some trace has not been reported or found. This leads to the conclusion that she was killed outside the city. The killer could not have emerged from the place in clothing worn when the murder was committed and the body drained of blood. He could have been too easily detected, and stains would have attracted attention.
Donahoe also mentioned fibers that had been found on Beth's body. Analysis had shown them to be coconut fibers. He said,
The killer used a thick bristled brush of coconut fiber to scrub the body clean before he removed the body from the murder den.
While police worked through the 75 names discovered in Beth's address book stolen from Mark Hansen, as well as looking into Hansen, who we will also be looking at much closer in a future episode. Another suspect, one who would become quite popular at the time, would come crawling out of the woodwork, Corporal Joseph Dumais. I've mentioned confessing Sams before, but Joseph Dumais took confessing to a higher level. 29-year-old Corporal Dumais, stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey, was in custody of camp authorities. He had just returned from a 40-day leave, wearing blood-stained pants and his pockets stuffed with newspaper clippings of the Black Dahlia murder. He claimed he had known Beth since 1942. He told investigators,
"When I get drunk, I get pretty rough with women."
To top it off, he made a 50-page confession in which he claimed to have blacked out after a date with Beth. The confession also contained details of marks on Beth's body. Marks which were supposedly corroborated by Los Angeles authorities. He even stated,
"I dated that gal on January 9th. The next thing, I blacked out. When I came to, I was standing in the Pennsylvania station in New York."
A February 8, 1947 Herald Express headline read,
GI in full confession of Black Dahlia murder. Army Corporal Joseph Dumais, 29, of Fort Dix, New Jersey, is definitely the murderer of the Black Dahlia, Army authorities at Fort Dix announced today.
Even Aggie Underwood jumped on the Dumais bandwagon, printing headline,
Corporal Dumais is the Black Dahlia killer.
However, 9 soldiers stated they had seen him at Fort Dix between January 10 and 15. Modern researcher Steve Hodel believes the newspapers manufactured a suspect by using an amateur profile made by screenwriter Steve Fisher, where he believed the real murderer would turn himself in if police and press reported that they had found a confessor and declared the case solved. Fisher thought the real killer would be driven at some point to come in and give the lie to the phony suspect's confession. Hodel claimed on pages 188 through 189 of his book Black Dahlia Avenger. LAPD detectives were almost certain from the outset that Dumais was not the Black Dahlia Avenger. 4 of his army buddies had testified he was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, on January 15. The newspapers knew this too but played up the story in the hope that, if Fisher was correct in his psychological assessment of the Black Dahlia Avenger, the killer's ego would force him to turn himself in to police, if only to expose Dumais as a false confessor. An interesting theory, and one that most researchers do not share. But we will look into the Steve Hodel theories more closely in a future episode. It's more likely that viable leads were few and far between, causing news to dry up and reporters more and more likely to grasp at whatever straws they could to keep milking the Dahlia case for what they could get out of it. By now, police were getting sick of the constant stream of confessing Sams, all requiring time and effort to check out their stories. Time and effort that could have been better put towards more important clues and suspects, or at least looking for them. By now, papers were printing amateur profiles dreamed up by authors and screenwriters. These amateur profiles would join profiles concocted by professionals and semi-professionals. Aggie climbed on the Dumais is guilty bandwagon, but she also supported profiles made by her close friend, Dr. J. Paul DeRiver, head of the Los Angeles Sex Offense Bureau. In time, he would send out his own bait through the pulp press to try to lure the killer. What he reeled in would become one of the most controversial suspects to rear his head in the Dahlia investigation, Leslie Dillon. And the aftermath of the Dillon affair would become the most controversial part of the investigation, becoming a major instigator of the 1949 grand jury investigation. But we'll look into the DeRiver-Dillon theory in a future episode. A theory is supported by modern researcher. Researcher Pu Eatwell. And this theory also features another name recently mentioned, Mark Hansen. But before we start studying this and other theories and suspects in greater detail, let's, in the next episode, look at some of the already mentioned profiles made by both professionals and amateurs, both past and present, as we continue to investigate the murder of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, in depth.